Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Collected Book, Volume 1. So this is an omnibus edition originally put out by Mirage Studios. I think a reprint that contains more or less the same thing was put out by another place. I want to say called IBW, but I'm not 100% sure. And the contents of this book include the first 11 actual comic books of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, plus specific issues featuring Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Leonardo as main protagonists. So, over the course of the 15 issues in this omnibus edition, there's a lot of stuff that happens. One of the things that I was really struck by as somebody who came to the Ninja Turtles first through, I don't remember, as a child, either through the cartoons or the live action films, but definitely more recently, I've been rewatching the live action films. So as somebody more familiar with the live action films, especially, it's very interesting to go back to the original comic books starting from 1987, because there's a surprising amount of stuff in the first 11 issues, plus the 4 Turtle individual focused ones. There's a surprising amount of stuff that actually gets carried over into the film itself, into the first of the live action movies especially, but often with somewhat subtle changes. So, for instance, in the film, Raphael gets beaten up by the Foot and he's on the verge of death. And they have a big fight in April O'Neil's apartment, and the antique studio that her dad had owned, that burns down, and they have to flee to April's house in the country. In the graphic novels, it's Leonardo who gets beaten almost to death by the Foot in the special Leonardo issue, and then there's a fight between the Foot and the Turtles, Casey Jones and April O'Neil, and they flee to Casey Jones's grandmother's house in Massachusetts. So there are these differences, these subtle differences often, but there's also some big differences. April O'Neil is not a reporter in the graphic novels. That's actually one of the things I found most surprising. She is, when we're first introduced to her in issue 2, she's the assistant to a scientist. Let me see if I can find it here. She is an assistant to a guy named Baxter. Let me find the opening bit. And what Baxter has done is he has invented these robots called mousers. And they go around the city and they catch rats, which of course Splinter is not a big fan of in principle. April was his assistant who helped program the central computer system that controls the mousers via radio signals. What she didn't know is that Baxter was actually using them to tunnel into banks, to steal money, and to undermine the foundations of important buildings in the city so he could hold New York for ransom. When she finds out about this, she kind of says, I'm going to go to the police. And he kind of says, well, how about instead of that, the mousers try and kill you. She's saved by the Turtles, and that's how she connects with them. So I mean, it's an interesting difference there because, like, April O'Neil is famously a news reporter. That is her job in the series. And, like, she's incredibly well known for that. And in the comic books, she just isn't. I mean, possibly after issue 11, she becomes a reporter at some point, but she kind of loses the job with Baxter when he attempts to kill her and then is defeated by the Turtles. And she doesn't really seem to get another job. So, yeah. The other big difference is that, so in the third of the live-action movies, the Turtles go back to Japan in 1603. In the comic books, they spend a disproportionate amount of time traveling through space and time. They're continually dealing with aliens. And that's actually an interesting thing, because in the first three of the live-action movies, none of their antagonists are aliens. In the first movie, it's the Shredder and the Foot Clan. Second movie, it's Shredder, Foot Clan, and Tokka and Razor, who are mutated, a wolf and a snapping turtle. And then in the third film, the villains are the Daimyo and Walker, the English merchant who seems more like a pirate. It's all human or mutant and animal antagonists. And yet in this, in the comic books, it's continually aliens. There's a lot more sort of supernatural type stuff here, which is really kind of an interesting distinction. Let me see if I can find it good. Oh, yeah. So we've got these dudes. These sort of little, was it Krang? I forget, from the animated series. These sort of little brain-looking guys who ride around in exoskeletons. They're aliens. And they inadvertently end up sending the Turtles on this crazy cosmic journey where they go out to a planet, a Federation planet, not the Federation from Star Trek, I'm assuming, but a sort of evil Federation planet that is attempting to force this guy whose consciousness has been transferred into a robot to build them a transmat beam so that they can beam weapons or whatever directly into the spaces of their enemies, basically so they can win this crazy war. The Turtles then get scooped up by the Triceratons, who are one of the opponents, at least, of the Federation, and they get taken to the Triceraton planet, where they are forced to compete in sort of gladiatorial games in an attempt to force the robot to build the transmat beam for the Triceratons. Interestingly enough, that actually kind of is similar to a Star Trek episode, Bread and Circuses, in which a planet of basically Romans forces Spock and McCoy to compete in gladiatorial games in an attempt to persuade Kirk to do what they want. And then from there, they get transmatted back to Earth by the little Krang-looking guys. A few comic books later, there's a woman who steals a time scepter and in an attempt to escape from her master, whom she's trying to evade, ends up in New York in 1987. Master finds her through time. The Turtles are basically like, hey man, why don't you stop being such a big jerk? And the woman transports them back in history to a sort of prehistoric and yet somehow medieval period, in which Earth is apparently overrun with demons and witches and whatnot. And so they face this dude who's sort of a demon, maybe, probably. He's gotten transformed into a demon by Lord Simultaneous, which is the master that chick is trying to escape. And he gets a hold of the staff of the time staff thingy, and he uses it to raise the dead. He's just buried an army of dead people around his castle in the hope that someday he will get some sort of object of power that lets him raise them and fight all his enemies, which worked out perfectly well. But then Lord Simultaneous shows up and he's like, yeah, dude, I've got a fucking smartwatch now, and I'm going to zap you back to dinosaur times. And then he sends the turtles back to New York, takes the chick back to their time and dimension, whatever it is. It's a bunch of crazy shit that, like, if your primary reference point for the Ninja Turtles is the live action films, this is much more bananas. It's nuts sci-fi type stuff in a way that, I mean, then the whole premise of the Ninja Turtles with like mutated turtles that have learned karate from a rat, etc., etc. Yeah, there's a sci-fi element to it, but it's rooted in Earth. And the comic books just aren't. They just are like, fuck it, let's take the gloves off and let's send Donatello to another dimension where this dude with a special crystal on his pencil has sent all of his drawings, and now they're battling some villagers and Donatello has to save them. There's this crazy shit. So it's an interesting difference between the comic books and the movies. And I'm going to watch the first season of the animated series pretty soon. Stay tuned for that next week. There should be a video. Yeah, we'll see how it compares.